All right, hi. I want to talk today about an underpainting, what it is, why it's so important, and how to go about doing it. So, this is an example of an underpainting. It's kind of like a gesture drawing in that it's your first stage of a more complex work of art in which you focus primarily on shapes and shadows. So, this is a pretty simplified one of three gourds, and I've focused on the lightest value, the darkest value, and a midtone. So why do we do an underpainting to begin with? Because it helps us block in the values in the composition before you go on to color and texture, which inherently is just a little bit more complex. So this is a finished painting. This is where we're headed eventually, where layer by layer on top of the underpainting, which you later don't see, there's full color, beautiful use of kind of complexity of color mixing and retaining those first values that you first set out observing in the underpainting, but just further developed. So here's an example of an underpainting that has brown in the background as the next step. So what you see here is a picture and what will eventually become obvious as eggs in a carton. Again, relatively simple, a focus on composition, shape, proportion, and where the lights and the darks are. And then the next step, once the underpainting was dried, I started to mark in my background because it's, I think, especially working with acrylic paint, great to work from the background and then forward, object at a time, blending into wet acrylic paint works, whereas trying to blend into dry paint doesn't. Here's another example where the red that you see is the underpainting, and then the background was put in, and then some details in the vase that we see on the left was put in. And this is a very similar composition, same objects, but just to show you one step further. So again, working on top of the initial underpainting. This is an example of the composition that I created for my still life example I'm going to show you now, just so you could see kind of where I was going. This is a photo reference, but in life, I'm working from these objects directly in front of me. And this is the underpainting that I created. Now, it's not the exact same composition because when I started working, I kind of moved a few things around visually. But this is my finished underpainting ready for the next layer. So again, focus on shape and shadow, and it's just one color. And I'm just mixing it down with water, just like you would watercolor, and accentuating the lights, the darks, and a variety of midtones. So now I just want to show you how I made it. Screen share over to a video. Okay. So here is the process. At first in real time, there again are my objects that I showed you in that image, not cropped. And here I'm set up. I'm gonna speed up this first part. Got my canvas, got my brushes, got my viewfinder over here, so I can use it to remind me how I wanted to crop my composition. And I've just chosen one color. In this case, I've chosen a red. I recommend choosing either a blue or a red. It really doesn't matter which. And just squirt it out into your palette. You don't need a ton. You can always go back for more and just use water and then dilute it down. The more water, the lighter the value. The less water, the darker the value. Okay, I'm gonna speed it up now. Notice I've also got my blue cloth close by. That's a really handy tool to have, or just any sort of rag. and I start marking it in similarly to how I would approach a gesture. In this particular arrangement of objects, there's a lot of angles I realized as I started painting. So it was helpful to kind of work with lined edges first, but notice that by the end, it's all about the value. You saw me blotting just now with that cloth that I have, which I can use kind of like an eraser or like a, yeah, kind of like a kneaded eraser, for example, to pull up some of the paint to make it lighter. But that only works as long as the paint is wet. So you want to do that early if you notice that that's something you want to do. Okay, so that's the process. The last thing I want to say about an underpainting is that once you go here forward, this underpainting is in no way a paint by number, for example, or like a blueprint that you have to stick to and work on exactly without ever looking at your still life objects again. Au contraire. The still life objects you are going to continue to be observing from life as long as the painting continues. And as you notice different nuances in the size and the negative space between objects and just angles or anything you just didn't notice during that first underpainting, you'll change it as you go. So this underpainting is a great place for you to begin and to give you a fantastic starting point. But we're not going to see it at the end. And it's going to shift and change the whole time, or at least the shapes may shift and change the whole time, just as you continue to learn about them. So I hope that helps you create your underpainting. Have fun. Thanks.